But one major pull of these programs is that they allow you to settle internationally. And then what is the cost of the program? So the basic cost for almost all of the programs for the 2-year degree is about 150K US dollars. Wait, guys, I can see a lot of your faces. Thank you very much for switching on your videos. Just before we begin, I would just like to clarify the norms for the session. I would love it if you could follow it. First is keep your videos on. It would be lovely to see your faces. It would feel like a conversation to me. Thank you, everybody who's done it, and the rest of you who can, please do it. Next, keep your microphones on mute until and unless we get to the question answer section so that there's no disturbance, right? And lastly, I have a small presentation ready. So it'll take about 20 minutes of the session. So let me just go through the basic information and then we can jump into your questions. After around the 20-minute mark, I would just request you guys to raise your hands if you have any questions, and then we can, take that question, have follow-ups, correct? I guess everybody is okay with it. If you're okay, can you just show me a thumbs up? Guys, okay. I see a few people have raised their hands already. Guys, is there something that you want to ask? You can come off mute and ask. Yeah, okay, might have been my mistake. I'll just begin with the presentation then, right? So the reason why I think all of us are here, the deferred MBA program. In very fancy terms, it's just everybody's chance, all of us are sitting here, to get into a flagship MBA program even before you get out of college, even before you have a job, right? That sounds fancy because most of the colleges in America do not allow students right off the bat to get admission. They require some sort of experience, right? Okay. So just giving you a very brief overview of what deferred MBA programs look like. So generally, students are allowed to apply in the final year of their undergraduate or postgraduate studies. Then you gain an admit, hopefully, luckily you do. And then you're allowed to work for 2 to 5 years before commencing the program. Something that I need to clarify right off the bat is that the program, the MBA program, is the same. The deferred MBA is just a way, it's a different mode of entry, that is all. You will still be sitting with the same class of students that will be a part of your cohort, right? Great. Why should you do it, right? I think one of the biggest reasons is that you're securing your future right off the bat, right? Even before you've graduated. But I think these are the two things that are least commonly talked about. First is the early access to the network, right? Once you get an admit, however many years you may choose to defer, you have the option of becoming friends with and learning from the experiences of the most smart, interesting students that you'll ever meet. And that's even before you started your MBA, right? And that network is not only restricted to people from your own batch. You get to meet people from the current batch. You get to have exclusive networking events, exclusive newsletters, right? And the second big is freedom to take risks. A lot of the people have that goal of getting an MBA into mind, and hence all of their actions for, I think, 3 to 4 years are targeted towards getting that MBA, right? That might mean that you have to take the safer options, such as going to investment banking or consulting, just to prove your mettle to the MBA colleges, right? But once you get a deferred MBA admit, you have the freedom to take risks. You don't have to, I don't mean it in an offensive way, but you don't have to take the dull banking jobs that you thought you would have to, right? You can work on your own startup. You can work in social enterprises. You can chill on a beach. Most people don't do that, but you could do that if you wanted to, okay? The big names on the screen. So the most famous program, and I believe the first program that was started, was the 2+2 program by Harvard Business School. It's the oldest deferred MBA program. As the name suggests, 2 plus 2 is 2 years you work, and then 2 years you study. You come to the B school, and then you study. Out of all of these schools, Yale's Silver Scholar programs is a little bit different. In the Yale Silver Scholars program, if you get an admit into the Silver Scholars program, you join, you finish 1 year of your MBA, then you have a year-long extended internship, and then you come back to do the second year of your MBA, right? Apart from that, the rest of the models are the same only. I think Indian School of Business Young Leaders program is also the only deferred MBA program that runs in India. Not mentioned on the screen is IESE Business School's Young Leaders path. That is available for both undergraduates and people who have up to a year of work experience. So anybody who's interested in that can look there as well. Somebody who wants to study in the UK, right? Then coming to the timeline, right? I am taking to the start of the timeline is today. And the first thing that you need to focus on is building your profile. I think hopefully a lot of you must have done it till now. Even if you haven't, it's not late, right? Whatever time that you have left, you can undertake internships, you can undertake volunteering activities, you can basically build up anything that you believe is lacking in your profile. And don't stop doing that even after your applications are complete, right? You don't know what is going to happen in the interview. You don't know what is going to happen after you've gotten admitted, right? Keep this in mind that wherever you feel like you're lacking, if you feel like you need more leadership roles, go ahead, take charge of your life and get those straight away, right? The second big thing requires the most amount of time. And honestly, very few people give this amount of time. Even I didn't. These are the essays and the letter of recommendations. Once you've decided that you want to pursue an MBA, talk to the recommenders that you want should write you a letter of recommendation. Just tell them why you want to do it. Just tell them that, ask them first of all that would they be interested, because it is a very long process depending upon the number of schools that you apply to. Even though there is a format that most schools follow for their letter of recommendation that includes 3 questions. Some schools, for example, Haas, they have their own questions that they ask the recommenders. And that would mean that the recommender has to put in more efforts. So just tell your recommenders that I was thinking of applying. Why are you thinking of applying? Why do you think they would be a good recommender? Right? And once they agree, then you can begin the journey of reminding them that these are the tasks that I had done and these were the outcomes. At the end, they only have to write your letters of recommendation, because in case the business schools detect even the slightest hint that it was written by you because of the writing style, then they would completely reject your application, and that's not worth the risk, honestly. Right? Then you have the essays. As soon as you decide, just to begin with the process, just make an account on all of the schools' sites and go through the application form once. Just read through their essays. Even though you don't have to come up with the answer right away, even let's say you're 6 months away, you still need to have that somewhere at the back of your mind. Maybe while you're going to sleep, just think of one question, write down anything that you remember or that you think can fit into the theme, right? Then we have the standardized tests. The general guideline is around 3 months, that you require around 3 months to prepare. That can vary depending upon how much experience you have already with tests, how much is your syllabus combined, or if you're preparing for other standardized tests. But generally, 3 months of time seems like a good amount, right? And lastly, we have the application form. The entire application form, apart from the essays, LOR, standardizers, consists of certain information that you need to fill additionally, right? That can include what extracurricular activities are you taking. That can include what volunteering experiences have you had? Have you had any international experience, right? It depends from the school to the other. And finally, majority of the deadlines for the schools lie in the period of March to June, right? So try to be ready by February. Keep have all of this information ready by February, so that during the end you can also have time to ask other people to have a look at your form and then just give it a second review, basically, right? Then we have the application components, right? These are the 6 major components. There's another one that I'll tell you at the end. First is academic transcripts. All schools require the transcripts. Initially, while you're filling the application, they will ask you to put an unofficial report. That just means you can put a screenshot, you can put a PDF. I'm a DU student, so I just had my mark sheet, which they agreed to, right? You just need to upload those. This will help them in understanding what are the courses that you took and how much have you scored in those courses. Then we have your resume, right? Even though all of these components are a part of the normal MBA application as well, the resume is strikingly different here because you do not have any work experience out of college to show, right? So this here you can focus on your academic achievements, on your extracurriculars that you did in college, and any, for example, papers that you've published, any research that you've done, any out of college, like let's say you founded your own startup. Don't forget to mention that here, and very, very importantly, mention your hobbies. Okay, it doesn't seem like the place to do it, but in just 2 lines at the end, just show them that you're more than that one piece of paper, and then you're more than just your achievements. What do you like doing for fun? All right. Then we have the essays. As I mentioned, give it 6 months. Majorly for all schools, you have school-specific essays. For example, Stanford, we have Why Stanford, What Makes You Feel Alive, and Why is for Haas, right? Describe the biggest commitment that you've ever made, was Yale's essay this year. Depending upon the number of essays, try giving that school a bit more amount of time. Apart from these very specific essays, most schools will ask you for your short-term goals, your long-term goals. What do you want to do pre-MBA? What do you wish to pursue post-MBA? And how does your story align? Some schools may give you a separate essay to write about this. Some schools might just give you, for example, Stanford just gives you a 120 character box that you have to fill with what do you want to do post MBA, right? So you have to squeeze your answers in either way. Then we have the letter of recommendation. As I already mentioned that most schools require 2 letters of recommendation. Talk to your recommenders pretty early on in the process. Tell them that it's going to be hectic if you want to apply to 8 schools. That is asking a lot of their time. So just make sure that they will not back out at the end. For deferred MBA applicants, schools generally ask for 1 recommender to be an academic recommender. So that may be your professor, your head of department, your principal, or any teacher that you know from school, whatever. And the second has to be from professional experience that you've had. So that may be one of your internships, an extracurricular activity. Then we have the GMAT and the GRE score. B schools accept both of these scores, the GMAT and the GRE. We'll discuss more about them further on. But yeah, it's not a mandatory requirement. A lot of schools have now started to make the GMAT and GRE optional, but students still prefer to take it just to show that they're academically capable of getting into that MBA and getting through that MBA, right? Lastly, we have the test of English proficiency, which is your TOEFL and your IELTS. Diksha, thank you. The test of English proficiency, TOEFL or IELTS. Most schools will require you to get it. Harvard does, Stanford does, but a lot of schools don't. Yale has its own criteria for judging the test, judging like your communication skills. Columbia doesn't ask for the test, but if you're applying to multiple schools, you will have to give it, right? Coming to the last part is sometimes schools will ask you for a video component. For example, MIT asks for a 60-second video introducing yourself and how do you think you fit into the MIT culture. Yale also has a specific video component where it will ask you 3 questions and you have to answer them. Like it gives you some time to prepare and then you have to answer them, and that's recorded as your response, right? And they do not require a separate IELTS or TOEFL score. Now, coming to the standardized tests. As I mentioned, GMAT and GRE are both acceptable. One big question is, which exam should I give, the GMAT or the GRE? GMAT is only used by business schools. So in case you're thinking of applying to multiple graduate programs like the MPP or let's say Masters in Economics and programs like that, you would lean towards giving the GRE, but because that allows you to apply to multiple institutions, whereas the GMAT is only taken into account by B schools, right? Both of the tests have verbal and quant sections. On the GMAT, the verbal section focuses majorly on the grammar and your understanding of the English knowledge, whereas GRE focuses on vocabulary. For me, this was a big consideration because I felt like my vocabulary is weaker, whereas my grasp on the language is much stronger in comparison to, in terms of understanding the language. And second is the quant. The GMAT quant section is more challenging than the GRE section specifically because of the data sufficiency questions. Indian applicants generally do very well in the problem solving section. We're very used to that, seems pretty easy to us. But where even candidates who prepared for the CAT sometimes falter is the data sufficiency part, right? Because the questions are of a very different format than we're used to. Final question, which of them should you take? Which one of them is better? It depends upon you. The first thing that you should do is distinguish between both of them in terms of which schools take your score. Second, take a diagnostic test. In case you're scoring better on the GMAT or on the GRE, and you're able to understand what are the points where you're faltering at, and you think you have the time to improve those, take that test. Lastly, B schools do have a preference for the GMAT scores because that test was specifically designed for business schools, right? But that doesn't matter. A lot of schools have now started accepting the GRE. Before taking the exam, also take into account if the school that you're applying to accepts the scores, right? Okay. Now, finally, time for the questions. Okay. I think these were the questions that I had put in the registration form. So and a lot of you wanted answers to them. So I'll just go through them very quickly. First is, how do you shortlist colleges? How do you shortlist schools? I had actually pulled up a list of all the business schools that allow a deferred MBA admission. And then I had gone into figuring out what the culture of the school is. I had begun networking with people from schools to understand more from their perspective if I would be a good fit. I'd made a set of questions that I would ask every person. I would attend all of the admissions events that they would have. This not only allowed me to get a deeper understanding of what the college community is all about, but also answer pertinent questions. For example, will they accept a 3-year degree? Are they going to, accept a GRE score, or will they accept a recommender that is not, for example, will they accept 2 recommenders that I have, both from the professional strata of my life, right? So I had done all of this and I'd come up with a final list that these are the colleges that I would like to target at the end. Then the second is how to prepare for the GMAT. This is a very personal journey, very honestly. Starting from the diagnostic test, at each and every step, you will have to give mocks and analyze scores, figure out where you're faltering, and then take remedial steps to improve your score. Mocks become a very important part of the journey. For me personally, the 3 major banks that I had used were, first was the OGs. These are the guides that are taken out by the official GMAT company. And you have 3 guides. You have the one original book, then you have one for verbal and one for quant. These are official questions that have been retired from the test. So that makes it easier for you to get a hang of what sort of questions will be there. The second thing that I used a lot was the Manhattan Prep books. These basically set a base for you so that you can start from zero if you want to and if you have the time. I had the time. That's why I wanted to begin and strengthen my base first before moving on to more difficult questions. And lastly, GMAT Club. It's a website. You can create a free account and they have like tests that they give out on subscription. So you can just take that subscription. I took the subscription for 3 months and you can do all of their questions. And lastly, fourth is the eGMAT verbal resources, right? If you feel like your verbal is weak, then you may go ahead with those tests. How to prepare for the IELTS or TOEFL? If you have good command over the language, this should not take you a lot of time. I had applied for my IELTS and finished with it within a week, right? I had taken 2 mocks and I was fine. I had a fine understanding of what do I need to write in order to score well on the test. Fourth is how to craft a stellar essay. More than just the essay, an essay is it's a very important part of your application because it binds it together, right? It tells the person who's reading your application what your story is. Throughout the application, you will have to be true to yourself. You will have to keep in mind why you're applying. You have to get your story straight. You have to understand what the reasons behind you've done things, right? Not just putting down achievements in your essays, but they need to know why did you choose this. For example, why did you go for, let's say, a volunteering activity where you could have taken an internship in a consulting firm? They will need answers for that. Why did you choose a startup instead of a well-established business, right? You need to figure out answers first on your own. Self-reflection, this process is very important. And then begin with writing your essays and figuring out, once you figured out who you are and who you want to be and how that MBA is going to help you, the essays become just a way of, explaining that and communicating that to the person who's reading it, right? And it becomes much easier to frame these essays and craft stellar responses to those questions if you know what you want to convey, right? And you can always take help from people that you know, people you feel could help you with this process more. Then we have what needs to be included in the CV. Again, very personal question. Any achievements, for example, what I had done is I had made a master CV where I had just put down all of my achievements that I felt were worth mentioning. Then I showed them to one of my friends who knew me very closely. And we went over things that made the most impact in that one statement, right? There are things that you might feel hold a lot of value to you, but when somebody else is looking at them, they might seem like frivolous things, right? So we don't want to put that across as the first impression in our application. Mention that somewhere, and when you get to the interview, explain and like you can talk your heart out at that point of time. Who to approach for your LORs? As I mentioned, schools generally ask for 2 letters of recommendation. A disclaimer here is that ask people who know you well. Do not go for titles or brands or big names. Go for people who've genuinely seen your work and who believe that you deserve getting an MBA or that MBA is the right path for you, right? Luckily, both of my recommenders were super helpful. They knew why I was doing an MBA and they were willing to write that letter of recommendation for me and edit it however many times that, they till they felt like it seems good enough, right? And my letters, my recommenders, one of my recommenders was my mentor from Enactus, right? And the other was the CEO of the organization that I had worked with in one of my internships, right? Then, and as you can see, I did not have an academic recommender because I believe that did not add to my profile at all, and that the other recommenders could tell a much better story, knew me much better, than any of my professors did, because I did not want to write about my academic capabilities that they could see from my GMAT score and from my GPA, right? Then we have how much do grades and test scores matter. If you look at the websites of the schools and if you see the range of the GMAT scores and the GPAs that they have there, it's a very wide range, right? People with a 690 have also gotten into top schools. People with 750 have also not gotten into top schools, right? So there's no one box that you have to take, right? And I'll ensure that you'll get into a top college. It's more about how strong your overall profile is. For example, there are people who have a stellar GPA, right? But they faltered in the GMAT, right? That can counter. The schools know that you might have nerves on the day, that you might have not been able to perform very well in the exam, right? That's okay. They will take that into consideration. And you can obviously mention any of these flaws in the additional essay that they'll tell you to write. But like one thing that matters here is that the amount of scholarships tend to generally depend upon the scores that you've had. GMAT scores or GRE scores tend to have a large impact on the amount of scholarship that you will be able to get, right? So keep that in mind while applying. And they do not consider, like, for example, if you're unable to score well in one test, you can give the GMAT again, right? It does not matter to them. All that will show is that you've shown grit, you've shown perseverance, you've taken the test again, and you believed in yourself, even though you knew that you had failed the first time, right? I think these are all the questions. Now I would like to just ask people to raise their hands. I've spoken a lot. Hopefully none of you are asleep. You guys have, okay.
Take a glass of water. Take a glass of water. You've been taking...
Thank you, Ashutosh. But I think we'll just begin. Let me see who's raised their hands. Wait 1 second.
Can we first take the questions from the chat box?
That's also fine. Right. That'll also work.
Okay. So many people have the doubt that when can you apply? Like, can you apply after you've graduated? So can you please clarify that?
No. Okay. So you get to apply in the final year of your undergraduate or postgraduate studies when you've had 0 full-time experience, right? That means if you, for example, I was in a 3-year degree, that means I would have to apply in the 3rd and final year of my degree. A lot of you here must be from the engineering background. So you will apply in the 4th year. If you've graduated already and you've started with a job, you cannot apply, right? Except for the IESC talent path. Please look at that specifically on their website. But in majority of the schools, that's not the case. But if after your undergraduation, you've just started with a postgraduate degree, right? Let's say, for example, if I'm doing right after completing my BCom, I start my MCom degree. At the end of my MCom degree, I can apply, right? The entire point is that you do not have professional experience, professional full-time experience, right? This is what this program is for, right? This admit. Yeah. Next question, Shweta. Yeah.
Okay. So people are asking the deadline for Columbia Business School.
You will have to check it. For me, the deadline was actually extended. April 15th was the deadline, but due to COVID, it was extended to June 1st. But for all of the schools, it changes each year. So I would request you guys to please have a look at that. Just go to their website, just type Columbia Deferred MBA Program deadline, and they have that mentioned on their website very clearly. Yeah.
Okay, so Aditya Raj is also asking, how important do you think is the national ranking or prestige of the undergrad university you're graduating from? Right. So, yeah.
So I'm not going to sugarcoat and say that it doesn't matter at all, but very honestly, any opportunity is what you make out of it, right? If you've gone to let's say to a tier 2 college, that does not mean that you're completely disqualified. If you have achievements and if you feel like you've done a lot and that you've shown, a lot of, you've put in a lot of work into yourself, please go ahead and apply. Do not like self-reject yourself. That's not going to help you at all. Even though like the big names help you in some way or the other, right? You just need to work a little bit harder to prove yourself, right? That's all the case is. Please do not self-reject yourself just because you do not come into the top 2 institutes of the country. I will not suggest doing that at all.
So now all the people are sending the questions on chat. So we actually wanted it to be more personal. Yeah.
I'll just ask Sriram, I see that you've raised your hand. Would you like to come off mute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello.
Hi, Nishtha. So I was saying I have a grace in one subject. So, I mean, all others are good. I mean, in just the third semester, I got one grace. And in my school, I don't have a makeup option. So I have to upload all the transcripts, or is it just the one transcript that's going to be uploaded?
You have to upload the entire, if you have a 3 or 6 semesters, then you have to apply, then you have to upload all of the 6 semesters. Yeah, you can make up for it in other ways, like maybe through your GMAT scores or other courses. If you, for example, if that was a maths or a quant course, then you can take other courses from outside and counter that.
All right, sounds good. And one more question I wanted to ask. So, who was the mentor? I mean, you said you had 2 recommenders, right? So who was the mentor?
Right. So the mentor was basically, I was a part of Enactus Shriram College of Shriram College of Commerce. Sorry. So my mentor was basically, she was holding the position that I took in my second year before me, right? So she had guided me throughout like the 3 years that I had at Enactus. We had a very close bond. She was overlooking everything that I was doing and she was guiding me. Okay? So she was my recommender. She had seen that what I had done in those 3 years, inside school, outside of school, and she was able to put in incidents into the letter of recommendation that if she was just, somebody who had seen me work from the outside would not have been able to do it. They would not have been able to make it personal. Right?
Okay, got it. And the last thing,
no, Sriram, I'm so sorry. But okay, a lot of people have raised their hands. We can come back to you later if you have the time, right? Guys, and I would just request you to have questions that are a little bit broader, if that's fine. For personal questions, we can take our time later as well because a lot of people are available here. So any broad questions that you have, right? Let's go, Avi.
Yeah, hi, I'm audible?
Yeah, perfectly.
All right. Yeah. First of all, congratulations and stuff for your acceptance to Columbia Business School. Huge accomplishment. I had just a couple of quick questions. So, as you're from a business background, a lot of different MBA programs say on their website that they have a preference for STEM applicants, like HBS does that, and I think Wharton also does that. So, how can an applicant from a traditional business or finance background help its application to stand out from the rest of the pool? Because I think it would be more competitive.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So here's where your school selection and school research comes in. I'm from a traditional business background. So for me, Howard obviously was not the first choice, right? As you mentioned, and I would like to mention for everybody else, the 2+2 program gives a preference to STEM students, people who would not choose business, would not choose to get a business degree later on in their careers, right? So that does not mean that you should not apply. I mean, I didn't apply. I had applied, but I had that in the back of my mind that even if I don't get in, then that's fine. You can still apply 2 years later, right? You will stand out depending upon what you're doing, right? For example, Stanford takes in candidates that want to do entrepreneurship. This does not mean that you have to change your path in life just because you want to get into a specific school. You will have schools that are perfect for you, just the way your application is or just the way you've had your experiences, right? So I would not suggest like lying for an application or just changing altogether all of your goals just to get into a good program, because the program is designed to be a specific fit, to be a good fit for specific students, and that is the case for these programs, right? So do your school research, select your schools on the basis of where you feel you would fit best, and where there, it's a two-way thing, right? Where their resources would be able to help you achieve whatever you want to achieve in the future, right? Yeah, let's listen from Malvika now.
Hi, Nichita. Thank you so much for this session. First of all, it was very informational. I just had a couple of doubts about IELTS. So, like, if your medium of instruction throughout school and college has been English, how many colleges did you find that still required you to give IELTS? Because I'm like presently deliberating whether it's worth giving it or not.
You will have to give it. Indian applicants need to give the IELTS, right? If you want to apply to, let's say, very specific schools, let's say only Yale and Columbia, don't give the IELTS, right? But almost all institutes mention that on their website, that if you're from India, and even, for example, even my medium of instruction throughout school and college has been English, but I still had to give the IELTS, right? It just shows that to them, that because you're from India, they know that most of the, sometimes the instruction does get into converted to Hindi very easily. So just give the IELTS. I think it was non-negotiable for me because I was applying to a large number of schools. But if you want to, you know, applying to select schools, then you can obviously take that later. Yeah. Let's hear from Shahrish. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
Yeah, hi Nishtha, great session.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you about how you would describe the culture of each of the top Ivy League MBA schools. Just because I haven't done that research yet, so I'm just wondering what you came across and how what kind of fit would each school be, if you could just describe in short.
Right. Okay. So that's a very controversial question and also very personal, right? It depends upon the people that you talk to from each school. For example, when I was talking to people from Darden, University of Virginia, Darden, their entire response to any question that you have, the amount of access that you have to a direct admissions officer, even though you're not a admit yet, and the response of the students, right? Anybody that you reached out to, anybody that I had reached out to for my Darden research, immediately messaged me back, right? They took out time from their calendar. They helped me with understanding everything about the school. Whereas a lot of the times, schools do not have that option of communicating, where you have to do your research to figure out times. I cannot take names, but there have been times where, the students are busy and they're unable to take out time for, sitting down with you. But that does not mean that you cannot do your research on your own. How do you figure out the culture of the college? The first place to go is the student. I am not divulging into, specific accounts, but let's say, for example, I'll take the example of Yale, right? Because I wanted to go into social entrepreneurship, I had figured out people that I wanted to get into touch with who had gone into Yale, who were from SRCC, people who had done what I had done and wanted to do what I wanted to do, right? Or were doing what I wanted to do, right? I found that sort of, you can call it a resume twin. And I had gotten in touch with them to understand how Yale or how that specific school was helping them build their path, right? Yale is very famous, for example, for its social impact space and the amount of students that go into the nonprofit space right out of their MBA, right? So you'll have to there's no, I cannot give you that answer. I think it would be much better if you form your own opinion about different schools, read through different blogs that they come up with, go through their Instagram channel. Haas, for example, Berkeley Haas, they have such an amazing Instagram account. Go ahead, do all of this talking that you can on your own and form your own opinions. Like my opinions and other people's opinions, don't let them, create a bias. Okay, great. I hope.
Thanks, Nishta.
This time. Great. Okay. Arushi, can we have you next? Arushi Jain.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Nisha. Am I
Hello.
audible?
Yes, perfectly.
First of all, thanks for the great session. I mean, it's
It's
quite
okay.
informative.
Thanks.
Yeah. But I wanted to know more about, if you took any sort of help from any admissions consultant, and
Right.
if yes, then which one?
Right.
And how did you choose that particular person would be able to help you out with your essays?
Right. That's a great question. And in fact, a lot of you had asked this question in the form as well. So I had done my due diligence in deciding which firm I wanted to go ahead with. I took the help of an admissions consultant for 2 of the schools. The name of the consultancy is Applicant X, right? How did I decide about getting that? Almost all schools allow you, almost all consultancies actually allow you a free evaluation. It's a 20-minute, 30-minute call where they'll go through your profile. They'll tell you if they feel you're a good fit for the program and answer any specific questions that you have, right? I found that was not enough for me. And I decided that I wanted to go ahead with the admissions consultant because I felt that I lack somewhere or the other in writing, in telling my story, right? I felt the rest of my parts of my application were good, but that's where I needed the most help, right? Applicant X came into the picture because their storytelling is what they're known for the most, right? I saw that through my application as well. And now coming to the big question that do you need an admissions consultant? Very personal question. I decided because I did not have a lot of time. I had done my due diligence. I'd sat with about 20 or more so companies, both from India, from abroad. Third is obviously the pricing. It tends to become expensive, right? And lastly was, do you feel like there are certain parts of your application that are lacking that would help, that would, require help from people who've had professional experience coaching other people into those schools, right? Yeah, if you feel like that is something that you want to go into and that you want to take that help, then please go ahead and do that. I had also through that 20-minute call or that 30-minute call, you realize if you're a fit for the organization or if the organization is a fit for you. If you come out of the call feeling happy, feeling like, yes, you can do it, that generally is a good sign, right? Secondly, I also wanted to go ahead with a smaller firm so that I knew that I would be given much more personal attention rather than going with a bigger firm where I would be, begging for the time of the consultant, right? So there's certain factors that you have to keep into account. Yeah, I think that was my decision. I'd taken help from that. Yeah. Also, guys, no problem. If you guys want help from Applicant X, you can just visit their website. Just to give you a disclaimer, before going into any consultancy, please take the free profile evaluation. Please figure out that you feel good about going ahead with that consultancy, right? Any that you might find. Great. Nikhil, can we hear from you?
Yeah. Hi, Nishta. Good evening.
Hi.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah. So congratulations. And my question is, for someone who is interested in social entrepreneurship, as I am, and having worked with 1 to 2 NGOs, having my own, sort of NGO enterprise, and now currently working with a social enterprise whose founders are probably incoming students at one of the good universities abroad.
Right.
So ideally, who should be my, whom should I approach for an LOR? Because those are young students, and yeah, in that case.
Who knows you the best? My mentor is 1 year, the person who wrote my letter of recommendation, she's 1 year elder to me, right? It does not matter what their age is. She's 22 or 21. It doesn't matter what their age is. They need to be able to describe the work that you have done, and they need to feel passionate about sending you to these schools, right? If they can show that much trust and they can show to those schools that, you know what, exceptional candidate, right? then please choose them as your recommenders. Age doesn't matter, as I mentioned, brand doesn't matter, their title doesn't matter. Okay? All that matters is they've seen the work that you do. Okay? And they can write your letter of recommendation, and they're willing to put in those hours because it's very tiring for them as well. Right? Yeah.
Understood, Nisha. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Shaurya?
Hi, Nisha. So I just wanted to ask you about about how the GPAs on an Indian scale translate to a 4.0 GPA in the US system, right? So since we have in India, we follow the 10.0 system, so we don't really know of a way of actually qualitatively judging our GPA according to their standards.
Right. Don't judge it. They don't. No schools ask you to translate your GPA into a 4-point scale. There are schools in the US as well that follow a 5-point scale, they follow an 8-point scale, 10-point scale. They're not going to judge you in that sense, right? They're not going to, they will look at the amount of course, the number of courses that you've taken, what have you scored, rather than just looking at that one number, okay, what is your GPA, right? They know the amount of rigor that goes into various different programs as well. For example, people from the business background in India will be judged against initially people from other schools in India only, that is under the 10-point scale itself. Okay? Isliye don't worry about that much. Okay? Obviously, it helps if you can say that you're in the top 5% of your class, or if you're in the top 10% of your class, that percentile and that ranking matters. Okay? So rather than just looking at that one number blindly, ki mera GPA is 10, you like is 9.8, they don't know how many people have scored 9.8. But if you say, even if you have a 9, but you're in the top 5% of your class, then that matters, because then they're able to compare you to other people or other candidates that are applying to the same institution, right?
Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Congratulations for your list, by the way.
Thank you. Ashutosh?
Yeah, hi Nifta, congrats again.
Hi.
Like
Thank
lots of congrats today. So my
you.
questions come from the fundamental stuff, right? This is a deferred program and we're talking about it, but I have a couple of questions around this. First of all, that since it is a deferred one, so how do you back it against the usual business school admits, like the ones after school, or maybe people like giving CAT, GMAT after the JobX? And the second question is like, how was the...
Let me answer this first, and then we can come to the second.
I mean, I have a question that is, I'm just trying to tag it along. That
no, acha, theek hai, bolo.
Theek hai. See, the second question comes like this. Say, we generally talk about, say, IIT IIM ka combination, or maybe SRCC IIM ka combination. So how does this one alter? Like, does a foreign GMAT or does a foreign MIM or MBA allow you to settle abroad, or maybe, you know, just get options abroad?
Right. Theek hai. Heavy questions. First one, that's why I was telling you to get me. I've forgotten the first one already. Great. I'll answer the second one first, if that's right.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. SRCC plus IIMs. Okay. My coming from a very personal story, sabka journey is very different, right? I personally did not want to go straight into my MBA, right? I'm a very strong believer that I need some sort of work experience in order to figure out where my interests lie, and I need to set them into stone before I take in, you know, experiences of different people and network with different people across varied backgrounds in an MBA. Okay? Right out of the bat, I did not want to get an MBA degree because of that fact. A lot of the people have very clear intentions, right? I have done 3 internships. I have, you know, in, let's say, McKinsey, I've done one in Bain. I'm very sure that I want to develop a career in consulting. Then an MBA right out of college makes perfect sense for you, because you know where you want to be. Why would you want to spend more time, you know, getting a job? Okay? Where I've also seen a lot of people in India, I think IIM has the option of deferring your admit by 1 year. Not a lot of schools do that, but in case you've got a job and you would like to get experience first and then come back to the class, they allow that. It obviously helps having experience. Okay? When you're working or when you're in a class, I'm talking about universities abroad, when you have, when you're a part of class that has people with 5 to 8 years of experience, the average work ethic they have there is about 4 to 6 years. Okay? If you have people there, and the entire mode of studies there is that you learn from other people's experiences. When you sit in that class, you have to tell your own experiences, right? When you don't understand, you haven't worked in a work environment, when you haven't worked in a setting that has, forced you to lead, or where you've had to, counter conflicts between two members of the team, how will you contribute to that conversation? These are the kinds of questions that I was asking myself, that I'm going there not just to take information from the network that I'm creating there, not from the professors, and not just studying. An MBA is not just studying anymore. The worth of the MBA is much more because of the kind of network that you create, right? Because of the kind of experiential learning that they force you into. Okay? So if you cannot contribute, if I could not contribute to their conversations and make it more meaningful, it didn't make sense for me to join them, right? Right now as well, I have a deferred, I have the option of deferring between 2 to 5 years, right? They're not forcing me to, or I'm not forcing myself to join right after 2 years. If I feel like I'm ready, by the time I'm in the 5th year, I will join them, right? It's all about knowing when you're ready. Okay? And how do our applications, remember your first question, how do our applications stand against other people who have work ex? You're not judged with people from those, using that method of entry. You are judged against people who are applying to the deferred MBA pool only, right? So it doesn't matter, like तुम्हारा work ex सबका ही 0 होता है, ठीक है? So it doesn't matter, you're being judged against the same group of people. Yeah.
Got it. So asking the other parts of the question, does it allow you to settle abroad? Part A.
Yeah.
And for the deferred thingy, so it is for ISB as well, if I'm not wrong. So
right.
For foreign, is it flexible, like 2 to 5 years or what? So these.
Yeah.
I mean, for all colleges, या फिर सबके लिए?
नहीं. So for example, Stanford has very flexible. ठीक है, you can join 1 year maybe. Harvard becomes a little bit strict. It tells you 2 to 4 years, but if you want to defer more than 2 years, so it becomes a little strict. It needs your reasons why do you want to defer for more than 2 years. Columbia, for example, tells you whenever you're ready, please join. ठीक है, 5 years तक का तुम्हें option मिलता है. Again, they allow you that flexibility. 2 to 4 years, it can be 2 to 7 years, it can be 2 to 5 years, depending upon the school. So please do your research. First part of the questions will allow you to settle abroad, obviously, right? The entire premise. So, like coming to the big elephant in the room, the fees. Okay? They charge you a lot. Okay? For Indian students, you have to convert that into dollars. Even without converting into dollars, the fees is a lot, right? And you have to finance your MBA, and you have to realize that you have to ask yourself the question: is it going to be worth it? Okay? They allow you the option of settling not only in America or in the in the vicinity of your college, but one major pull of these programs is that they allow you to settle internationally. Okay? All of these names, all of these big brands will matter whichever part of the world you go to. Okay? So they allow you to settle abroad. That's, if you want to come back to India, that makes sense. Okay? Come back to India. They're not going to force you into doing anything that you don't want to. But yes, that option, and I think most people do take that as a given only, that because I want to settle abroad, I would like my education to be there only so that I can create a network before jumping straight into a job. Okay, I hope I was able to answer all the questions. Ashutosh, we can't hear you.
Okay, can we take the questions? Other people are also raising their hands.
ठीक है, sure, yeah. Okay, I think, if you...
Yeah, so I'll actually ask my question. I'll just
lower your hand. Cool. Swadha?
Hi, Nashta. Firstly,
Hello.
Congratulations for
Thank you.
securing admission. So currently, I would just like to give a background. I am in my 2nd year of BMS. But since the last year also has been online, I want to ask the question that wherein you come to building your own profile, right? So in this scenario, it is quite difficult to network with your seniors apart from the clubs you have. And secondly, the problem I'm facing right now is securing internships in good firms. So usually in colleges, they do not offer internships, especially for my college in first year. They probably give you once you go from the second to third year. So what would your advice be to how to build a profile in your second year from the point of view of internships?
Right. Try for off-campus internships. Okay. Your age and like it stops being a factor when you're applying off-campus. Okay. They don't know what criteria your school has or what sort of internship your school is giving. Your college is not going to stop you from taking internships outside. When it comes to networking, everybody knows that it's been difficult during the online space, but you have to realize that it also has its own benefits. Okay? Look at the pros that are there. You can network with anybody all across the world now. You don't need to be in their presence just to chat with them, understand their point of view, or get help, right? So look at the bright side as well. I'm not saying just ignore the the parts that you that are troubling you, but try what do you call it? Looking at the bright side again. Sorry. Okay. So how do you build your internships and everything? I think LinkedIn is a great network. Apart from that, people that you know and have done things that you want to do, be that from your own college or people from other colleges, just network with them, help them out. Be on the lookout for different, apart from internships, you can also look out for different courses. You can look out for different trainings. You can look out for even working in a startup. That will also help you. Okay? But you need to show them that you're willing, right? So don't let that become a barrier that just because we can't, get them one way. Colleges stop being that silver spoon. They're not going to feed you with a silver spoon every time. This is the time where you need to show those business schools that yes, I am willing to make a path for myself and I'm willing to go break barriers and look away from the traditional paths and make like a place for myself in the world, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So can we take some questions from the chat box?
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
So Pratham Mehra is asking, does volunteer experience matter a lot for applying to deferred MBA?
It matters everywhere. In India, we generally tend to forgo that, right? Where we're only entering, let's say, straight into college. We're entering into, we don't have I'm so sorry. 1 second. We're not asked to build a complete profile. We're just judged on the basis of the marks that we're able to secure. But in order to have a rounded profile, in order to have holistic development, you don't need to volunteer just because you want to get into a good school, but you need to show them that there are more causes that you care for, right? That you want to give back to the world, and if you don't want to, then that's fine. You can show them that you're helping or you're doing your part in other ways as well, right? For example, if you're founding your own startup, you can say that, whatever product that you have was built for this, right? I am helping people in this way. Volunteering experience is not necessary, but it just shows people that rather than just being selfish and looking out for your own good, you're willing to do that for other people as well. Business schools are looking for compassionate leaders. They're looking for people who care, who want to build society, right? They're not looking for people who care only about themselves, right? So you can show that to them in multiple ways. Yeah.
Okay, so we have this question. Should I include my online courses certificate in the transcripts?
Yeah, you have the option of including them elsewhere on your application form. Transcripts are meant specifically for the courses that you've done in college. Can I just call out Sanchit if you would like to ask your question? Sanchit, if you're there.
Okay, so can we take some more chat questions from the chat box?
Yeah. Ask.
Yeah. So people are asking what was your GMAT score, and did you receive any scholarship? And they're also asking the cost of the program, like how much
Right.
does it cost?
Okay, so my GMAT score was a 750. I scored Q50 and V42. Did I receive any scholarships for MBA, deferred MBA? I will be applying for scholarships the year that I matriculate. That is the year that I wish to join. At that time, I will be applying for scholarships. I am not supposed to apply for scholarships right now. And then what is the cost of the program? So the basic cost for almost all of the programs for the 2-year degree is about 150K US dollars, right? And then you have to add on expenses that you will be taking, for example, boarding and lodging, other like traveling expenses, the cost of living there, right? So all of the schools have that on their website, how to fund your how to fund your MBA, and how to, what sort of expenditures will you be taking into, right? So you can look at that वहाँ पर online. Yeah. ठीक है. Jay, do you want to ask a question? Guys, I'm so sorry, but we're running out of time. I have another engagement in 10 minutes. Can we please just listen to Jay, and I'll take another question, one more, and then
Hi Nishta, congratulations on making it to Columbia.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, how did your process look like, or your timeline look like after your application submission? That is, like, I'm guessing you would have submitted your application by April. So what did it look like after April? Like, how was the process? Yeah.
Got it. So after you apply, they review your application, and you either get an admit, or you either get an interview invitation, or you get waitlisted, or you get rejected at that point. After your interview, they take some time again, review your application along with the interview, and then give you either a yes, a no, or put you in the wait list. For me personally, the first application that I submitted was on April 5th. The last application that I submitted was on June 7th. So April, I had interviews. I had interviews in May. I had submissions in May. And again, I had interviews in June and results in June. So that was a very, all these 3 months, you can say, I was handling, my timeline was filled with interviews and other things that you have to do after your application, right? So you have to manage that along with anything else that you're doing, right?
All right. Yeah. Thanks. I'm sorry to have a follow-up, but since the follow-up is for the same question, but how did your ideal interview look like? What was your interview structure?
Okay. So interviews are very different for different colleges. Okay? But the broad questions that they'll ask you are, first, I divide them into 3 brackets: your past, your present, and your future. Past would be, what courses have you taken? Why have you taken them? Present would be, where do you stand right now? What have you done in college? What do you plan to do after college? And future is, why an MBA? Why do you want an MBA from this school? What does your career trajectory look like? Okay? Isme, they ask you questions based on your resume, right? That would be the things that you've done in past. Majorly, these are HR based questions where they just want to understand more about you as a person, right? And different schools have very different structures for their interview as well, and timelines as well. So I can't delve deeper into that, but generally, if I were to consider all of the interviews, then these were the 3 brackets that they lied in. They would ask you questions about why do you want an MBA? Why do you want an MBA from this school? And then questions about you.
Yeah, thanks, Nishta. Also, good luck for whatever's coming up.
Thank you. I think one last question.
Okay, so we can take finally last couple of questions, maybe. Right. I think the questions here are more personalized, they're asking about their personal situation, so we can't take all the personal questions
right
now. So So there's this question: would you recommend applying in round one, considering the fact that there is more scope for scholarships and also higher probability of approval since more seats are available?
Right. There are generally for whatever schools that you have rounds, try applying in round one. That makes more sense. As whoever's written that question, you have more chances at getting in because the program has a lot more seats, right? Logically. Okay. Scholarships, again, the year that you matriculate, it depends upon that. Most of these programs have one single deadline, right? Where they're looking at candidates and evaluating candidates in that one specific round only. For example, Harvard's 2+2 program, one deadline, 29th April. Okay? For different schools, please have a look. I think Yale is the only one that has 3 deadlines that span across the year. But otherwise, schools will have deadlines, single deadlines only, right? Only one round of application. Okay, so apply in that round only, right? All right, guys, I'm so sorry that I have to cut it off here. And I had a great time and I loved talking to all of you and listening to your questions. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you for your wishes and congratulations. Great. Okay. Bye-bye.